Well, it is the day before World Finals here, and I am in Chase Center as they're setting things up, and I'm joined right now by the president of Esports at Riot Games, John Needham.
How you doing?
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations.
Thanks for being here.
Did President start this year? This is the year you got president, right?
It is, yeah, yes. It was early this year.
So you guys kind of restructured, right? Esports is its own business unit now at Riot?
Yeah, so Riot, we are building a new kind of entertainment company. That's our new vision for Riot. That's really grounded in gaming. We talk about it. It's built for gamers, by gamers, and esports is one of the big pieces of that. We have entertainment now with Arcane, and then we have our core business around games. So that's how we've kind of organized the company around a traditional entertainment company structure, but completely different.
Yeah, okay. I think it's really exciting, and probably also helps people understand a little bit more from the outside how this stuff works, because for a while there was like the global or central esports,
yes.
And then there was like the regional side.
Yes.
And while this distinction still exists a little bit, now it's all kind of centralized in underneath you, I think.
We are one big org now. That's awesome. It's great.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about Worlds.
Yes.
So it has been a couple years since you guys have been able to do something like what you are doing tomorrow at Chase, sold out stadium. What has it been like kind of returning to this after a couple years away from it?
Oh man, the biggest thing is just the energy from having people. Again, seeing our fans' faces, that is what gets us out of bed every day and what gets us excited to do our work. So that first and foremost has been the most exciting thing for us. And for Worlds specifically, the competition has just been amazing. I think the weekend of quarterfinals was probably some of the best League of Legends I've ever seen. And we have 2 Korean teams in finals, and there are just storylines everywhere. And we've got our Michael Jordan of League of Legends playing, and we've got this great scrappy team in DRX, who I really love as well. So I think we're gonna have a really great finals. It's gonna be fun.
What has it been like as you've been trying to kind of figure out how to do all this again, right? Because I assume that there's some atrophy over a couple of years where you're not having to book out venues and do all this stuff, and then you kind of have to get back into it. So has there been any kind of, relearning how to run the wheel?
100%. So yeah, like you mentioned, we have been pivoting events for 2 years at the last minute, trying to figure out how to actually execute now. We haven't had to do that as much this year, which has been great. But we still have a lot of logistics around how do we keep the players safe. COVID is still a thing. I get asked all the time, why are you guys still testing for COVID? Well, we're an international sport. We have international players coming here whose home countries have different requirements on how we send them back home and whether they can go back home. So we still have a lot of protocols around that. And we have now a hybrid of what we used to do pre-COVID. We still do, and then we've added all these COVID protocols still that we're following. But I'm hoping this next year it gets back to where we were pre-COVID.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are hopeful for that too, just for everybody, as I'm sure everyone enjoys kind of the ease of treating things as they were back in 2019 and before.
Totally, but there are a lot of good things that came out of COVID actually for us. Our sport is a digital-first sport. We leaned in really heavy because we had to on how do we do virtual competitions. We built technology around that helps us. As you probably know from MSI, we had a little bit of controversy around that piece of technology and how we balance pings and everything. But there's a lot of good stuff there that's going to really enable us to do more competitions because it's not all physical.
I think it's been interesting to see how quickly you all were able to adapt as well as things started to change back in 2020. Going a little broader though, and away from the event, you were just talking a little bit about how Riot now becoming this bigger media business, entertainment business. What is the role of esports at Riot these days? Because when I used to interview Mark and Brandon and Waylon, all of them, they said this is really a feature for players, right? It was less of this is a distinct business. It sounds like things have shifted in that direction now.
Yeah, totally. We talk a lot about, excuse me, we are the most player-focused gaming company on the planet. We just state it now.
Yes.
It used to be, we aspire to be that. We think we are that. But a lot of what we're trying to do with esports and we're trying to do with entertainment is we're trying to graduate our players to be fans. to identify as either League of Legends, Valorant, or Riot fans, and having that be part of their identity. So all the fandom around sports really feeds into that emotion, and we think makes our games a more significant, kind of meaningful part of our players' lives. It makes them fans. And so that's really how we're using sports and entertainment.
There's been a long-standing sort of, I don't know, line that people talk about when it comes to esports for Riot specifically, where it's like, oh, these things aren't meant to be their own businesses because they are just meant to have people go buy more skins or something, right? It's just a loss leader essentially for the game. Now that it's its own business unit, does this have to drive profit for the company? Does it have to be a profitable business on its own?
Yeah, look, we are a business. We have been building a business over the last 5 years. League of Legends as an esport is a sustainable business for Riot. And really where we're focusing now is how do we make it a sustainable business for the teams? Because the teams are still suffering. League of Legends, it's a very expensive esport for most of our teams. And so our ideal state from a business perspective is we get to break even. We get all the benefits of esports for free essentially at Riot. All the profits above and beyond that, we want to push out into the ecosystem, mostly to our teams. And we've done that over the past couple of years. We have agreements with the teams on revenue share and how we work, and we have distributed more than that over the past 2 years because we're trying to right-size the team side of the business.
Yeah. Is it difficult at all? Because you cannot control how much these guys spend.
Yes.
And so you end up in a situation where they continue to perhaps spend more and more on players or on different things. Also, a lot of these folks are in other games under other publishers.
Yes.
So it must be an interesting challenge where you're like, we want to make sure these guys break even. And they're like, great news, because we're going to spend another couple million this year, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And we very deliberately don't get involved in their choice of how they want to invest the money that we distribute out to them. So yeah, rising player salaries, it's always a concern. Yeah, it's a big issue in our business right now.
I know Nicolo, CEO, he was
Yes.
there last night for Media Night, and he obviously cares a lot about the esports side.
100%.
What types of things does he look to you to make sure is happening on the esports side? Like, what are you held accountable essentially as the president?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned we want to build businesses out of esports, so we have business plans. Nicolo holds us to those business plans, which is great. But mostly what Nicolo wants to see is he wants to see us going big. I mean, what Riot does and why I love working at this company, I feel like I'm an entrepreneur in this big company. And so we do things like we opened a new broadcast center in Dublin this last year called Project Striker.
Yeah.
It's a bleeding edge broadcast center that we built in partnership with Amazon Web Services and Cisco. It's amazing. Please go sometime. I'd love to host you there and show what it can do. We're building another one in Seattle. We're doing a lot of work on how we can revamp and update our watch platform on our website and how we can build more features that will kind of engage and thrill our fans. And he's very supportive of that. But mostly, like when you look at Valorant and how we've launched the Valorant esport, we don't cut corners. You know, we go big. Part of what we believe in is we want all of our sports to feel super premium. Because what we want to do is we want to pull in non-endemic sponsors. We want to pull in third-party stakeholders, investors, and teams. We want them to look at our product and go, this is an incredible, high-quality sports product.
Yeah.
And Nicolo really supports me in that.
When you talk about upgrading the watch platform,
Yes.
is that like lolesports.com?
It is.
Because a lot of people think lolesports.com sucks. It
does, but you can get good rewards if you watch stuff there.
Okay. The watch platform, I think a lot of people enjoy that part, but
Yes.
obviously, like, there's been times, even during this Worlds, where you will go, like, I think it was like groups ended and like quarterfinal schedule was not up. It would just
Yes.
like there's no games available soon,
Yes.
and you're like, what is this? Is Worlds done now? So.
Hey, Travis,
yes.
This is like one of my biggest frustrations, and I'll get on a soapbox for a minute. We are not great right now at doing basic sports marketing. And by basic sports marketing, I mean telling people what matches are coming and why they should watch, reporting on those matches, reporting the implication of the results of those matches, and then again telling people why they should watch the following weekend and why it's going to be exciting. We're a relatively new sport. You know, we are 11, 12 years in right now. And so we're still trying to figure that out because we're a gaming company. You know, this isn't like something that's natural for a gaming company to do. But that storyline and that's so important in all of sport, right? We just haven't nailed that yet. And the website's a key part of it, right? It's not a source of truth. I go to other websites a lot to see what's going on and where to watch things, which is unfortunate. But we're going to fix that. And we're going to work more closely with teams on helping them to promote their brands and helping them to build stars out of their players, because we don't do a great job at that as well.
Talking about marketing,
yes.
There were a lot of people who were hoping to come to Worlds, wanted to buy tickets,
yes.
had a hard time with this.
yes.
And so I don't think we've heard from Riot yet on kind of what the situation was with ticketing, why it felt delayed. I think the information that came out was kind of rough. We had, even on my team, my community manager Numi had like a Twitter thread going on like, here's tips on how to buy tickets, because a lot of people got confused by it.
Right.
There was all these different ways. There was like verified fan, there was MasterCard stuff, there's all these different things. And so I think a lot of people came away, especially North American fans, from the ticketing process this year feeling frustrated.
Yes.
So I don't know what the sort of internal response or thoughts are from Riot on all that.
Yeah, we just need to get better. And this is part of that adjustment of having no crowds for 2 years to now having crowds. Another thing that comes into play that might be interesting is, when we look at how we're going to stage an event, it has an impact on the tickets that we sell. When we look at bringing co-streamers in and where they're going to sit, because we want them in the arena now, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more as well. That has an impact on the seats that we sell. But this year, there's really no excuse. We just got behind and we were late. That's all I can say. All I can say is I'm sorry. I'm frustrated that fans were so frustrated, and I'm just really appreciative that we still had enough fan interest, that we sold out as well as we did. And all the arenas we've been in have just been filled. When I was talking to a guy at Madison Square Garden, he was saying we've sold more tickets to the Hulu Theater than they've ever sold around an event there, which is really amazing. So thank you to all the fans that did suffer through and get confused about buying tickets. We will get better. Yeah. We just weren't good this year.
All right, so I know you say you guys are going to do better on the ticket stuff, and you need to do better. There's kind of a mantra among League fans that's like, it's just always this way.
Yes.
So are there efforts that you guys are making internally, like actively now, to make sure that tickets are available sooner next year and that all this stuff can get communicated earlier?
Basically, we're just scaling our organization with more professionals who know how to do this stuff better. And we're going to have a new twist on ticketing for live events very soon as well that I'm not going to talk about, but I will just seed it out there.
Okay.
That we're going to do some things around our events that lean more into the virtual aspect of events and how we can pull fans deeper into our big events.
Okay, cool. So I have a theory that at one point in time as a child, you were in some sort of competitive event.
Yes.
And you were winning and doing very well, and you made it all the way to the very end, and somebody from the lower bracket came up and knocked you out and you lost, and you now hate double elimination because of that. At the media night last night, Nas gave a big announcement that formats are going to change, and then you picked up the mic and said, but also no double elimination and knockout stage. The community has not been happy about this.
I think the thread was up to like 2,000 on Reddit before I left this morning, and I've not read it yet.
Yes. Well, I guess maybe we can have a longer discussion now about this, because I think the reasoning you gave last night is like all the major sports in the world do single elimination. Valorant does double elimination. Is Valorant not a major sport in this world?
So Valorant will be a major sport. Okay. Look, we're just going into our first year of partnership with Valorant. Like, we have been experimenting with Valorant events for 2 years, and it's been amazing. And the community around our sport is awesome and enthusiastic, and it's going to continue to grow. So we are always talking about formats for all of our sports. We have spent a year having a conversation around League of Legends esports, all the way up and down Riot. And where we landed was just what I said last night. We believe that Worlds should have the biggest stakes of all the events we do. It's the biggest event we do. And we believe that the emotion, the excitement of on one given day, the biggest team could get knocked out means something in the sports experience. And it's really just that simple. It's not overthinking it. We don't hate double elim at all. We think it's a great structure. We just think for an event like Worlds that's as big and impactful as Worlds, that we want to keep from knockout stage forward, single eliminations for now. But we constantly talk about this.
Should Valorant fans be panicking right now? Because if they get big enough and to the size and their events start to become the size and scope of Worlds,
yes.
It sounds like they based off the philosophies you have, they might have to move to single elimination because then it'll become one of the major sports in the world, right?
Well, we are not considering single elimination for Valorant, so I'll be very clear about that. But we do always talk about formats and always talk about what's best for the event. So it's not inconceivable that we go to a single elimination with Valorant at some point, but it's not planned. The fans are happy with the format that we have. We have enough to do this next year in launching 3 international leagues and getting our whole regional infrastructure set up that we're not going to mess with the format for Valorant now.
Do you feel the fans are happy with the format that you have in Worlds right now?
I think, no, I don't. And you know why? I think there are a lot of matches that are meaningless in the format that we have right now. And that's another part of the equation that we look at. We want every match ideally to mean something. And I think there's just a lot of wasted matches right now in Worlds. I think once we get to quarterfinals and semis and finals, I think it's amazing. It's an amazing tournament. But before that, it's not optimal.
So one of the, I think one of the interesting things to me about the single elimination, double elimination talk is we had these amazing quarterfinals, right?
Yeah.
And you had even the casters and talent on the English broadcast that were saying, it's such a pity that this team only gets to play one best of 5 at this Worlds. And so I think that's kind of what's been interesting to me is I feel like the esports leadership is holding back this wave of fans and their own talent and media and all these people that are saying, please consider double elimination. And it is hard because in these conversations, it sounds like, well, we just feel like single elim is better. It just makes the stakes higher. And so I'm curious, what would it take for you to consider sort of the outcry of people screaming for double elimination?
We do consider it.
Yes.
That's the thing. We do consider it. We listen to our fans. We just made a decision. It's not about feeling. It's about the stakes. It's about what we want Worlds and those final stages to represent. And we want it to be not just about the best teams in the world, but the best teams in the world on a given day. And we think that's important.
All right.
It's that simple.
I'm curious to see how things evolve over time. I think a lot of people are hopeful that if we see format changes next year, even if they don't bring double elim, that there will at least still be considerations around bringing double elim in the future. But it sounds like you guys kind of want to see how these go first before you look forward.
We have other
to
changes.
Stuff. Okay, all right, very good. All right, so we talked a little about this a little bit as we discussed the ticketing situation and all that stuff. But I have for a while now noticed a pretty big difference between the way that we see Riot Games, especially League of Legends on the game side, communicate to their community and engage with the community, and the way that the esports side does, where I think you see a lot of devs, they have their own Twitter accounts, you see AMAs, you see dev updates, all that stuff. We don't see as much of that on the esports side, and even this conversation right around double elim is I think the first time anybody's heard about any thoughts or conversations around this for the past year since we had Worlds conversations. Maybe we had something about it at MSI, I forget. And I think there's a lot of people who would like to hear more on this stuff. I think even just in terms of Worlds, right, there's been ticketing is an example of it, right? But even with FanFest right now, it's going on right outside. If you go to Lolesports.com, the top article is about FanFest in Atlanta, not about FanFest in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And so I am curious what your thoughts are on the level of communication that gets out to the community at this point in time from the esports side, maybe even how that differs from other places within Riot. I don't know if there's something unique about esports that makes it so that you guys are a little quieter.
Yeah, there's nothing really unique about it. I think it goes back to just getting better at basic sports marketing, right? And a big part of that is community and communicating to that community, and we just haven't been great at it. So we are hiring esports community people right now. We will get better, but it's just we've got to focus on that. We have spent 2.5 years just really reacting to COVID and all of us being home and doing all that. We'll get better at this, but I agree, we don't communicate enough. It's super important. Look, I'm a huge Boston Celtics fan. I go on the Celtics blog every day. I'm on their Twitter. I follow everything to do with the Celtics. It's really important. And I want our fans to be engaged daily. We just haven't been great at managing that, managing our channels in a way where we can consolidate esports news in one place to make it easy to follow multiple leagues and things like that. We'll get better. Yeah. We've got a really good guy who's working out strategy for all that right now.
There's obviously a lot of conversation around, as I said, like what's happening at this event or when are these events happening. But then there's also a lot of things that occur like, there was a day during groups, I think the last day during groups. It was about a 36-hour period where North America got eliminated. Papa Smithy stopped being GM for 100 Thieves and basically cited like, hey, we're worried about, or like roster differences, right? Which a lot of people took as a sign of rumored North American orgs pulling back on spending. And then also the leak or rumor around LCS moving to weekdays, Val taking the weekend, right? In that moment, the community goes, LCS is dying. Like all this is really a big bummer. And we don't hear too much from Riot on any of this stuff, right? It's like kind of a silence thing. There's nobody that comes out and says, hey, LCS is not dying. Like, here's the context on this, here's the context on this, here's the context on this. And I do a video that's like, by the way, guys, I don't think LCS is dying for these reasons. But I'm also
I watched your video.
I wish Riot was saying something as well, right? You know, even if it's just a post on Reddit or whatever. So is this something you guys are thinking about, or is there a strategic reason why you feel like you can't comment in these situations?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't want to comment on every leak that goes out there. And, we have windows where we want to talk about things. Like, I'll tell you, for the last 6 weeks, we haven't wanted to talk about much else than Worlds because we want the spotlight on Worlds and everything that's happening at Worlds. I will tell you, the LCS is not dying. We would never let it die. We are going to focus a lot this next year on the LCS and how we can make it better, how we can start to spur more interest in people watching the LCS. And whether we move to weekdays with the LCS broadcast, we're looking at that, but we're looking at it through the lens of science. So we do a lot of work on Twitch and viewing patterns there and on YouTube. And we will optimize for where we think the best slot is for LCS, but it is positively not the case that Valorant is pushing the LCS out and Riot doesn't care about the LCS anymore. We want to do what's best for the LCS. And the reality is, if you stand back and you look at our entire ecosystem, the LCK, they're broadcasting during the week. The LPL does the same thing. There are a lot of big American sporting events like Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football, right? They're during the week, and they're some of the most viewed sporting matches during a week. So the weekdays, it is not a death knell at all. I think in a lot of ways, with our audience, it might actually be better for them to see it. Yeah. The other thing we're trying to eliminate is, now that we have multiple sports going, we were surprised experimenting with Valorant at how much crossover there was in viewership. And in a lot of ways, and a great example of this, I think, is M2 for Valorant last year ran at the same time as the LEC Summer Finals. And when you saw Fnatic play in Valorant, you saw a bump in viewership, and the LEC finals went down, and then it went the other way when Fnatic was playing in the LEC. So we see a lot more crossover in viewership that we didn't expect between Valorant and League, and we're trying not to cannibalize ourselves and give our fans ways to enjoy both sports.
Well, I do want to talk more on both the status of the LCS and the Val and League stuff in a second, but before we get away from the communication stuff, I just wish you had said that stuff 3 weeks ago. Because I think what happens is League fans, especially LCS fans right now, they're kind of in like this despair cycle, right? Where they're like, oh God, we're losing at Worlds, and now we're getting moved, and all this stuff. And what happens sometimes is like whatever narrative gets out there first, if you don't do a good job of like coming in and like having a conversation about it quickly, it just catches on. Yeah. And so while we've done this interview, and I will link it 1,000,000 times, I know that for the next year, everywhere there's going to be all these people saying, well, League got moved because of Valorant. Now, we don't know if it's going to get moved yet. We can talk about it in a second. But regardless, if it does, that will be the narrative that has taken hold. And so I think that's where I ask you a little bit more on like, how much are you going to be able to be more proactive in like having these conversations? Because the esports world, it's moving so fast these days that these narratives just catch on, and then it's before, if you can't catch it fast enough, then I'm out there like chasing it, playing whack-a-mole, trying to be like, no, this interview with John I did 3 weeks later, and everything's fine, et cetera, et cetera. So
here's the honest truth about it. When we go through these changes, we want to engage teams, we want to engage other people in the ecosystem to get their points of view on some changes that we make. Immediately when we do that, it gets leaked out. But we're not done yet with what we want to do. So it's hard for us at times to go out and make a statement, to react to things like that when we haven't landed what the plan is yet. And then we've also got this issue of we want windows of communication, and maybe that's wrong, maybe we're too formal on that, where we give each announcement kind of its own room. So there's a lot of things happening in our ecosystem all the time. We want to pick our spots that are optimal for the product, right? And we also want to have our shit together, frankly, and know exactly what we want to do so we can respond to more questions. So when these leaks happen, when these threads start out there, we're a lot of times just not in position to really react and say something substantive.
Yeah. You don't have a Twitter account.
I don't.
Will you make a Twitter account?
I do have a Twitter account.
It's just a secret Twitter account.
No, it's not even secret. I've just never posted on it.
Okay, you've never posted. I wish you would make a Twitter account. I said this in a video at one point in time. I said, John Needham, please make a Twitter account, because
I heard about that.
I think to me, you not having the Twitter account, or rather not using it, it is something that it feels like the gap in some ways symbolized between where the levels of comms that I see from the game side and then for the esports side, where sometimes it feels like it's a bit of a silo at the top. So I won't press you on using the Twitter account in this interview.
Yeah, thank you. I do follow Reddit very closely.
Okay, yes. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. It's a tough place.
Listen, I figure that's where I can get the most critical feedback.
Yes, I think that is very representative. You do get the
Twitter's
most critical feedback there. Yes. Okay. We were talking a little bit about League and Val a second ago, but how do you balance these two sports and the needs between both of them? Because League's been around for a while. Val's like, in a lot of ways, I feel like everybody's like really excited about Val. It's like the new product. So how do you make sure that you don't compromise for one or the other, or maybe it is a compromise?
Yeah, we don't actually. We don't compromise for one or the other. Again, it gets back to how we window our events and our broadcasts to give them their own space. We also spend a lot of time thinking about how do we give them their own personality as well. And Valorant and League are very different products. They reach different fan bases who expect different things in their esports. So we're trying to find kind of what is the tone and personality that we want for each esport as well. It takes a while. That's why we've spent 2 years experimenting with Valorant before we went into our partnership model. So there is no compromise. There is no, if we do this for League, we have to do this with Valorant. There are some concerns around being consistent in how we police the sport and how we operate the sport, because we always want to have the utmost of integrity, and there are things just in the basic rule sets of how we govern the sport that need to be similar, because we always want to be consistent about that. But as far as formats, as far as the structure of the show and personality of the show, we want each of these sports to kind of find their own way.
Why do you feel that they need to be different, right? Because at the end of the day, even if the games themselves are different, they're still team matches made by Riot Games. You know, you would think in some sense that they would not need to be so distinct from each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what our fans want. So League of Legends, we know over half of our fans watch because they want to get better at League of Legends, right? Yeah. And they learn I would say, a lot more technical sport than Valorant is. For Valorant, very fast sport, amazing mechanics of these professional players and how quickly they can react to what's happening in game. So we very much focus more on, we want to be more of an entertainment product. It's faster, so that changes how we do the show. It's not nearly as technical as League of Legends is, right? And I don't think Valorant fans who are watching Valorant esports are necessarily watching it to get better as a player. I'm not going to get better at watching Valorant. Yeah. I will always suck. I
mean, right there with you. I don't. And to be clear, I don't think I'll get better watching League. I've watched a lot of it through the years. I continue to not be good. But I think what is interesting is you have had these different approaches on the Val and League side. One that has fascinated me is the fact that in League, I believe you call them permanent partnerships, and I think in Val you call them long-term partnerships. How much of a headache have the League folks given you that you felt like you wanted to make sure that they were not permanent for Valorant?
You know what, honestly, that is the first time anyone said that to me. I did not realize we had labeled them differently.
Well, and I mean, but I think it's not just label, I think they're structured differently too, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I think when you buy a spot in the League, unless something terribly goes wrong, you're in there forever, right? Whereas I don't think that same commitment, and there's no purchase, I think, for Val like there is in League.
So look, we took a lot of learnings out of the League of Legends partnership system and applied that to Valorant. And I think we architected a very modern approach to partnership with Valorant. So with League, we had the teams buy their slot, they bought in. It's not permanent. There are evaluation periods in that partnership. But it really didn't truly align us with teams. And it manifests itself in a couple of ways. So, one of the things you see is generally in our big leagues, you have teams that are really high-performing teams, and then you have a set of teams that are really low-performing teams, and they're not really investing in their roster, or they're not really investing much back in the sport, right? I don't think that's a healthy way to set up a sport. So with Valorant, it's not that the slots are free, that we gave the slots away. The teams are actually obligated to do a certain minimum amount of marketing every month to give us marketing materials every month that we can put on air to support their team and their stars. They're required to develop talent as part of the partnership. They're required to go out and get sponsors and do things. These are all good things for the ecosystem. So as long as they're doing those things, they're investing in their team, they're investing in the marketing of their team, they're giving us content we can use on broadcast, they will keep their slot. If they stop doing those things, we'll have an evaluation about whether we want to keep in partnership with them. But the reality is, Riot doesn't need the capital from the teams. We would rather the teams take the capital in Valorant and invest it back in the sport and invest it back in our shows and our events in a way that's just really healthy in building the sport. So that's the way that we took all the learnings out of the partnership system for League of Legends and applied it to Valorant. And I'm super proud of it. I'm excited for next year. I think it's going to be a new day for sports, not just for esports and Valorant.
I am very envious of the Valorant system. I wish there was a similar situation with our League teams sometimes.
Yes.
On the other thing that is very different that I think a lot of the community has noticed, and oftentimes League folks I think get envy of Val, right? Mm-hmm. So Double M we were talking about earlier, but also the co-streaming side, right? Where you have very different co-streaming strategies for both of these. There was a kerfuffle, I guess, about the co-streaming situation for Worlds even, right?
Totally.
So why the different approaches in these situations, right? Because whenever you see something, I think oftentimes League people say, wait, they're doing this in Val, this looks really cool, why don't we get this in League? And I think co-streaming is an example of that.
Yeah, we're just starting, we're testing. So if I wind the clock back with Valorant, when we first started doing Valorant events, we had just a handful of co-streamers. They were virtual because we didn't have a live audience at that point, and it was really successful. There were some events where we got almost half of our viewership from the co-streamers, so that was a new learning for us. And really, we took notice, and over the few years that we've been running Valorant tournaments, we've increased the number of co-streamers. Now we have hundreds around Valorant events. At Champions, in Istanbul this year, it was the first time we brought co-streamers into the venue itself and set them up with their own pods. Most notably, we had Tarek there. Shroud was there. Funny story, I gave up my seat to Shroud on the plane back from Istanbul, which was fun.
Sure, he appreciated that.
Yeah, it was great. I'm a huge fan of his, so that was cool. But we learned from that having the co-streamers in the venue made their viewers feel like they were part of the event. We're always kind of geeking out about how can we take these events and make the virtual experience richer for our fans to watch. So after Istanbul came back, I'm like, what are we doing for Worlds this year with co-streamers? And we didn't have a plan, that's the honest truth. And there are a lot of logistics around setting up co-streamers in the event. Like I said, we had ticketing to think of. There are logistics around where we set them up in the arena. Like just earlier today, I learned that one of the pods for the co-streamers, the way we have the lights angled on the set, it goes right into the pod. So we had to do some adjustments there. Travel, visas, all those things. There's logistics to consider. So this year for Worlds, we wanted to experiment with co-streamers. We wanted to start with a handful, like we did for Valorant a couple years ago, and see what happens with it. We've done co-streaming around LCS. It hasn't driven the level of viewership that we wanted, or that we've received from Valorant doing co-streaming. So hopefully we'll see with this experiment at this Worlds that we're drawing incremental audience to watch Worlds. And that's really at the end of the day what we want to do with co-streamers. We think these streamers reach a segment of audience that we just wouldn't reach otherwise. Yeah. So we are so on the co-streaming bandwagon. When we've done these experiments and we can figure out how to optimize the experience for people watching, we're going to do a lot more. We love it. We think we've introduced a whole new dynamic in viewing sports with co-streaming.
Switching gears a little bit over to LCS, in 2019 you did an interview that has been widely quoted where you said, "I don't want the NA League to be known as an import league." Yes. This year we were one match away, Team Liquid and EG, from having 14 out of 15 of the North American players at Worlds being players who had been imported over. There's also a rumor that you guys are going to open up minor regions in some capacity, unclear at this point in time, to not count against the import rule that is in place globally. So I guess I would ask, like, have things changed on the import stuff? Because it feels like it's only getting more of an import league, I guess.
Look, if we talk about formats a lot, the second most thing we talk about is our import rules. Because fundamentally, I don't believe fans will not like a team in the LCS that's filled with foreign players. I mean, like most of the teams are filled really with foreign players at this point. But here's the business implications. There are two sides to this coin. So if we opened up and we eliminated the import rule altogether, great for the LCS, I think, a region that probably is at a disadvantage compared to EU, China, and Korea, just from a wealth of player talent in region to kind of draw from to build a roster. So it would be great for them, obviously. They've asked for this. The other side of that coin is, what does it do to the LCK? You know, we are in partnership with the teams in the LCK. When they bought their slot in the LCK, they sort of bought the region, right? So we try to balance that with, okay, 3 slots or import slots. We may have more flexibility around that. Right now, we're not planning on walking away from our existing import rules, but it is something that we think about a lot, mostly to help the LCS, but there's just that other side of the coin that we need to balance.
See, this is fascinating for me to talk to you about, because I think the community is worried that opening I know that the teams have pushed you, obviously, to try to import or open up the import rules a bit, but I think the community is a little bit more concerned about doing this because, like, LCS is having diminishing viewership right now. If you ask the players or the fans, as I have, why are you less interested in the league? And they often say it's because they don't feel like there's players that they can connect to. And I don't think that's because of any kind of xenophobia or cultural issues. It's because of things like Summit coming to the LCS for one split, winning MVP in summer, and then fucking back off and leaving, right? And it's like, how can you build a long-term story or make people care about players who are slingshotting or rubber banding back and forth between the league? And so, you know, Niski famously came over, then left, then came over, then left. Yep. So I guess I am curious to you, a lot of people looked at the 2019 quote as a sign that you wanted to diminish how prevalent we saw top teams with, you know, in some cases, full rosters of imported players.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment? Is this something you are working towards? Do you want to see less of this?
I'm not sure if I want to see less of it. Look, if that's how the fans are reacting, and if that's where we find we're losing viewers, yeah, then it becomes a really important problem for me to solve. But I think looking at the problem from the other perspective, we opened up Champions Queue this last year as a way to help talent kind of train and become better pros. In Valorant, we have this premier mode that we're getting set to go into alpha that is going to be the talent acquisition layer in our ecosystem, and it's built right into the game. And we do talk about how could we make Clash in League a similar thing? How can we make Clash more relevant for our players and use it and directly connect it into our esports ecosystem in a way that we can find more talent? But from my perspective, the LCS, I mean, it's really kind of been a league that's been powered by imports. And I would be really interested to see what you're seeing on how fans are reacting negatively to that, because I haven't seen a lot of that, frankly. It's mostly what I see is just the lack of performance of the LCS teams when they get on the big stage. That, you know, what is the point?
That is what fans will say when we suck at Worlds, and then you ask them 6 months later, and they're like, I wish I had more players to root for or whatever. So I have a video, I'll send you. Okay.
Yeah, and the tough thing, you know, with players kind of migrating around to different teams and leagues, it's very hard for us to control that. That's really on the team side of the business, and I don't know what we do to help in that. But
I mean, you control it with the global import rule at the very least. Like,
we
that's
do.
one layer
We
of it,
do.
right?
Yeah, but you know, a lot of players. Yes, a lot of players are qualified to be in multiple leagues. So.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, you talked earlier about how LCS is not dying.
Yes.
I have a couple quick questions about that. There is a lot of rumors around NA orgs pulling back on spending.
Yep.
Is that a good thing, or a bad thing, a neutral thing? Where are your thoughts on that?
I think it's natural. I mean, I think all of us, all businesses are really thinking a lot about, are we going into a looming recession? I know that teams are having more difficulty finding investors and finding capital because of this looming recession. So I think it's a pretty healthy thing for teams to be more conscious about how much they're spending on rosters. I think it's mostly a reflection on just the state of the economy and kind of rebalancing their P&Ls to get it into a more sustainable state, which I love.
Yeah. There's also an interesting thing. We talked about this a little bit on the Val side. There are some fans who feel as though some of the LCS teams are hanging out. You know, it's like they're sending players in, they're spending a league minimum on roster, and then they're not doing very much content or marketing around it. Are you guys just screwed in your ability to keep these guys accountable because of the nature of the deals? Like, it's tough because I think a lot of people are like, we want to do more, but I also don't know how much agency you guys have in being able to like push these teams to really do more.
There are evaluation periods in our structure with the teams. And it is a problem, and it's a problem that we are trying to solve in this new Valorant structure.
Yeah.
It is hard, though, because most of the LCS teams, they have fully invested in their slot with us. It's kind of theirs unless they do something really egregious. It's very hard for us to say, hey, you're coasting, do better, you know.
Right.
Because, you know, we're not in charge of their P&L.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an unfortunate situation.
An acknowledged problem, though.
What, okay, so what are you guys looking? You said you guys are planning to do more for LCS next year, and to make sure that's not dying, you want to keep it around.
Yes.
What is the hope? Like if I am an LCS fan, I am an LCS fan.
Hopium.
Yes, yeah. Give us some hopium or something, because I think this kind of goes back to the communication thing, right?
Yeah.
There are so many people that actually kind of just feel like they want to see the LCS fail. They're very critical online. You know, you have fans. LEC fans, they invade the subreddit and they shit on us. What do you have to say for the fans that are worried about the future of the league? You know, what can make them feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are going to spend this next year really focused on the LCS. I think out of the 4 big regions, the LCS is suffering most. We see declining viewership, although at the end of last year, we saw an upswing in viewership again around summer finals that we were super happy about. But, you know, when I think about my experience with the LEC and I look at some of the other regional leagues around the world, they have found a good tone for their shows that really resonates with their audience. I think the LCS puts on a really high quality show, I'm not sure. I think we can do better with that show to make it resonate more closely with the audience.
Yeah.
The LEC team has just found a great way of kind of being more meme in their approach, to esports, and it's fun and the fans react great to that. I'd love to see a lot more fun in the LCS broadcast. We're looking at other ways. We talked about broadcast times that we can more optimize and get them out of the way of other esports so that they can have their own moment and their own audience, and we'll optimize for that as well. And then again, how can we support the teams in their marketing efforts and building stars out of their players and just leaning in more on that. But it is a big concern of ours, and we want the LCS to come back to the strength it was 2 or 3 years ago.
We only have a couple minutes left, so I will just throw a couple fun bonus questions in.
Yes.
I really love TFT.
Yes,
TFT,
so do
I have
I.
heard, rumors are that TFT is actually massive from a player-based perspective. I don't think you guys have ever really reported numbers around it. But we talk so much about Valley Sports, we talk so much about
Yes.
League Esports. Obviously there's Wild Rift, et cetera. But on the TFT side, are you guys planning on doing more than you guys are doing right now on the esport? Because right now it feels
Yes.
like it's more like community fun tournaments, right?
Yeah, totally. So one, TFT is the thing I do first every day of my life these days. I'm up very early in the morning and I play 2 matches of TFT.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan.
Doing Rage Wing all the time, I'm sure?
I'm doing Dark Light. Dark
Okay.
Light's my build right now.
Gotcha.
And we love the game. It is the #1 strategy game in the world right now. I'll just say that.
Okay.
It is huge with Fight for the Golden Spatula in China and the PC version around the world and the League client. You would be shocked at how many players that we have at TFT. When we look at TFT from an esports perspective, it doesn't have a lot of action like League or Valorant, right? Because it's a turn-based strategy game. So we're thinking about the esport in a different way than we are with League and with Valorant. We're thinking of it not really as much about a viewership product, but we're more thinking about it from a participation perspective. So what Magic does, what World Series of Poker does with their tournaments, we're dreaming of ways that we can bring thousands of players into massive tournaments around TFT. And I've got a guy who's working with the TFT team right now to kind of bring that to life. So may not happen this next year, but in the next few years, we're going to have a really exciting competitive system built around TFT.
That's awesome. I'm sure TFT people will love to hear that. Finally, anything exciting that you can say about Riot Esports in 2023? Anything you haven't said? We were talking before this, and you said that you love to throw things out in these. So.
Yeah, well, look, we've got 2 season start events this next year, both for League and for Valorant. We have this whole new international league system for Valorant. We've got 20 plus regional leagues around Valorant that I'm really excited about. We'll have some more format news around League of Legends, esports, and some of our specific regions that I'm pretty excited about, and some experimentation that we're doing there. And then all the formats for MSI and Worlds. I think with all the criticism, I think fans will be excited about the small moves we're making towards what they're telling us to do.
Where is MSI next year?
Have we announced? Nope. We have not announced.
All right. Well, I tried. Anyway, thank you so much, John, for sitting down. I know this is the first time we've been doing this in about 3 years, I think, since you've taken this role as leading on the esports side. So thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything you want to say to any of the fans out there?
Thank you for your participation in our esport, your fandom. We love you. We serve you. So please keep the feedback coming in. We are listening. Even though you may disagree with some of the decisions we make, we're constantly reevaluating how we can make our sport best for you. And I want to tell you, thank you for all the years of fandom and content and all the efforts you do around our sport. We will do this a lot more. Just ask.
Thank you.
Okay. And I will be here for you.
We will. Maybe we can get you on Hotline League or something like that, and then
love it.
People can call in and scream at you about double elimination.
Awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Travis. Yep. Cheers.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching that video. I'm at Worlds right now, and I would not be here live watching games that have no Western teams in them whatsoever, but still having a good time. If it wasn't for Alienware sponsoring our trip out here, we've done a whole bunch of stuff, and it couldn't have happened without them. So thank you so much to Alienware. If you want to support them supporting me, please click the link in the description below and purchase something. It doesn't even have to be a computer. I mean, it could be, but it could also be like a headset or a monitor. Anyway, they make great stuff. Check them out.